Good evening, everyone. We are going to call this special meeting of the Board of Trustees to order on August 3rd, 2020 at 5:03 p.m. Thank you for joining us, and I invite you to the Pledge of Allegiance. I was reminded of what this flag means earlier today. And so, will you join me in a pledge? I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice and liberty for all. All right, this brings us to 3.01, it's oral communications. This is a time that the public can make a presentation to the board. We will not be able to discuss an item that is not on the agenda. We have one item on the agenda, and so if that's something that you're going to talk about, we'll have a time for that. When that time comes, it'll be open to the public. But if there's any intent to address the board at this time, you may do so on an item that is not already on the agenda. Dr. Garcia, is there anyone who is from the public that would like to address the board?
I am looking for raised hands. Once again, if you are new to participating this way, you need to hit the participants icon, which is the two people on the number 26 next to it at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and find your name. And when you hover over your name, you will be able to raise your hand. President Green, I currently do not see any raised hands. Oh, wait a minute. Lisa Bennett would like to recognize Lisa Bennett.
Hi, just real quickly, this is not on the agenda tonight. I just wanted to remind folks of the Unification Town Hall on Thursday. I believe it's at 5 p.m. Is that correct?
5:30.
5:30. Thank you. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I do not see any other raised hands.
Okay. I guess that can bring us to 4.01. This is a discussion information item for potential general obligation bond measure for the November ballot of 2020. Dr. Garcia.
Yes.
Can you lead us in this content?
Absolutely. So we have several items here for your review. These are discussion information items. Remember, no decisions are being made, no actions are being made tonight, I should say. And some of the things at the board meeting last week that trustees asked for more information or clarification on, we have brought forward in this item, including a layout of the guiding principles and project list priorities, a draft resolution ordering the election for the potential bond measure, a tax rate statement for the potential bond measure, a timeline for the bond and unification, and property tax estimates for the potential bond measure. I also would like to invite our friends from WLC who have been leading our facilities master plan work, actually to start this section off by giving us an update regarding the survey that they put out. Two surveys, one of staff and one of the community. Ted, are you?
Hello.
Yeah.
Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Steve, can you make, there you go.
There we go. All right. So of the community survey that was put out, we got 188 responses. The average time came in at 31 minutes. I think it was hovering around 15 until the last few respondents. Some people might have gotten distracted and just left it open. Question number one, if you have a child, there was a plurality of respondents who have a kid in pre-K through 8th grade, and then 68 just engaged community members responded to the survey. Of those respondents, the majority with a preschool-aged child would be interested in sending their kid to a Sausalito Marin City School District preschool, and the larger majority of that was not applicable. Either they no longer have children of that age, or they have no intent of having any more kids. And then if a child attends school, which school do they attend? The majority of the respondents were Willow Creek parents, with a smaller minority of Bayside parents responding, and people who do not have a kid in the school district. And then we asked if they would prefer their kids attend one campus, or the kids in the Sausalito Marin City School District attend one campus or two. We ended up with 60% prefer a two-campus model, with 40% preferring a one-campus model. Of the respondents who preferred the one-campus model, 83% preferred that campus to be in Sausalito, with only 14% preferring that campus to be in Marin City. And then if they preferred the two-campus model, we asked them which breakdown of schools they would prefer, either two pre-K through 8th schools, which got 14%, elementary school and middle school, which got the majority of the respondents, and a pre-K through 1st and 2nd through 8th grade school, which only got 4% of the respondents. Then asking where you would prefer the elementary school to be located. The majority, 75%, preferred the elementary school to be in Sausalito, with only 24% preferring it to be in Marin City. And then of the people who responded to the pre-K through 1st and 2nd through 8th grade, the pre-K through 1st was a slight margin for the younger school to be located in Marin City, and with only one vote for the younger school being in Nevada, or in Sausalito. And then we asked about campus security, how comfortable people are with their kids attending school based on the current setup. At BMLK, 49% of people are comfortable with the security, with only 21% being uncomfortable and 29% having no opinion. And then at Willow Creek, the people who are comfortable with the security is a little bit higher at 67%, with 16% being uncomfortable with the security on the campus, and 16% having no opinion. Then there's more information from people elaborating on what makes them feel uncomfortable about either campus. Having scanned those results earlier today, the majority of the results just have to do with, policing who goes on and off the campus, better control through the admin office, and, potentially fences around some of the more open areas of both campuses to minimize people coming on and off the campus, not through the admin office and not having ID badges after being checked in. And then, so following all of those questions, we asked if there were to be a middle school on the Phillips Drive campus, what is the most important site or exterior feature, site or exterior improvements to the campus? The first place response, or highest ranked response, was outdoors learning and flexible furniture, with site improvements coming in second, play yards, followed by security, gates and fences, field improvements and lighting, parking, which ranked high for the staff, but is a little bit lower for the community needs, followed by outdoor drinking fountains, general site lighting, and then a district office improvements or relocation came in the last. The next question was asking about the interior of the existing campus and classrooms and interior improvements. Again, if there was going to be a middle school at the Marin City Phillips Drive campus. The highest ranked response was flexible furniture and collaborative classroom setups, followed by science lab improvements, art classrooms, window shades, and HVAC improvements, which also ranked high for the staff as the largest improvement that they would like to see on the buildings. Library improvements was about right in the middle, followed by the MPR and gymnasium improvements, classroom storage, classroom acoustics, and then at the bottom was kitchen and cafeteria improvements and room signage. And then the last question about the middle school or a potential middle school campus on the Phillips Drive location was asking about any additional features for that campus and what could be added to improve the academic environment. The highest ranked was a makerspace and computer lab, followed by STEAM lab, so people really kind of embracing the 21st century education models and looking for more engagement and active curriculum, followed by dance studio, and then green room audio recording studio. Solar panel is ranked towards the top as the first kind of non-academic item, followed by the preschool and community engagement and school marquee. And then we asked respondents about the same three questions for proposing an elementary school at the Sausalito Nevada Street campus. So the first question was asking about exterior and site improvements. Similarly, the outdoor learning space and furniture came up the highest, really reflecting the kind of contemporary society and the need for fresh air. Followed by play yard improvements, parking and drop-off improvements ranked very high. A lot of that dovetails with the kind of drawbacks on security on this campus was the way that you navigate the existing layout of the site. Security fences, also ranking in the top half, followed by the outdoor drinking fountains, water bottle fillers, site lighting, and admin office improvements, which is fairly typical that we would expect to see administrative improvements towards the bottom of the list. The academic items always rank higher for the tax base and active voters. We then again asked the classroom and interior improvements for an elementary school on this site. Collaborative classrooms ranked at the top with window shades and HVAC, improving the interior environment, followed by the kitchen and cafeteria improvements, really kind of noting the amount of space that the current MPR is limited to, and the potential surge of students that could be on this campus, and kind of coordinating how the cafeteria and kitchen serve them, followed by library improvements, and then kind of classroom staples of tackable surfaces, music room improvements, classroom storage and classroom acoustics, and then room signage, again, ranking down at the bottom. And then, of course, we asked the additional improvements to an elementary school on this campus. Makerspace and computer lab were at the top, followed by field revitalization for the existing Little League field, and then the gymnasium and MPR, followed by solar panels and green screen, audio video studio, and then a community engagement center and marquee rounded out the bottom. Would any of the trustees like me to go back to any questions?
I mean, and full transparency, Caroline and myself, we got to see this with when we did the ad hoc facilities. So I don't have any questions at this time, but thank you, Ted, for asking.
Yeah, I have no more questions. We saw a preliminary version before the final set of votes.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm unmuted. This is really helpful. Will these be posted so that we can spend a little bit more time between now and our vote on Wednesday reviewing?
Yes, I can send it to Dr. Garcia and have him distribute that.
That'd be great. Thank you. It's very helpful.
Thank you very much, Ted. I really appreciate the update.
I'm sorry, Toko, I do have one question for clarity. So the version that we saw before more responses came in, does he have the number of responses pre?
Pre? I believe we were around 100.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just short of 80 plus responded in that from last week.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, and I guess I'll go back and say, what are the big differences between the community response and the teacher's response? Or have you had a chance to think about that?
Yeah, they align fairly well in terms of what they're looking for. For the middle school campus, the community ranked the dance studio and art classrooms a little bit higher than the staff did. Mm-hmm. But the staff similarly focused a lot on environmental comfort, being near window shades and HVAC, as well as restroom improvements and classroom storage. Some of those items were ranked a little bit higher as well on the staff side. And as I had mentioned, for site improvements, parking was a large concern for the staff. and play yard and field improvements really ranked up at the top for them.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. I'm going to take the screen share back.
All right.
And I am going to bring back some of the items that trustees had asked for more clarification on. I'd like to start with the guiding principles. If you'll recall, in the construction cost projection, there were several tiers, and what trustees had discussed was really focusing on deferred maintenance and compliance in tier 1 as a guiding principle and project list priority. In particular, any codes any code work in order to bring our buildings up to code, to get in compliance with ADA and the Department of State Architecture. And there were 2 other tier 1 guiding principles, which were the replacement of portable classrooms and retiring of the COP debt. Trustees had inquired what the total amount of COP debt outstanding is, and we did some follow-up work. It is $3.1 million that we could potentially retire under this bond, freeing up a little bit north of $200,000 per year in the Fund 1 general budget. The second tier was a focus on health and safety. Health and safety improvements, outdoor spaces, study spaces, play spaces, recreation spaces. The final tier, tier 3, was a focus on enrichment, admin, and pre-K. Admin buildings, specials enrichment buildings, and particularly there was a call to focus on any projects that we might be able to raise outside financing for that would not have to be covered by these bond funds. And then lastly, pre-K.
So where in here would be makerspace computer lab?
That would fall under the specials enrichment category.
Because that was a high
Yeah.
priority in the surveys. So I guess there's layering of tier 3 as far as priorities.
Yeah, it looks like we would, given the updated survey results, maybe want to lift specials enrichment up
Outside
the top.
financing.
It was interesting too to see how many respondents from the survey. 56 people said they'd be interested in sending their children to pre-K. So perhaps that merits raising specials number 1, pre-K number 2, outside financing number 3, and then admin buildings number 4.
Yeah. What about collaborative classrooms?
And adding that as well. Yeah.
Can you remind me what that entails, a collaborative classroom?
Yeah, most new schools are built with movable modular furniture, desks, chairs, couches, so that you can very easily reconfigure a room from sort of the more classic rows or horseshoe shapes into small group study spaces that really allow students to collaborate in small and medium-sized groups. Some other sort of architectural features that you sometimes see associated with that idea is rooms that are separated by movable partitions so that classrooms can also collaborate with each other, or designing buildings that have cohorts of classrooms around a central space. Those are some things that I have seen work really well in terms of supporting cross-curricular collaboration amongst students and actually, incidentally, teachers. When we design buildings that sort of silo teachers and students in a single space, it tends to not support their collaboration.
Thank you. Okay.
How do standing desks fit in with that? Because we have those at Bayside MLK, and if we're looking to, reconfigure and have K5, pre-K 6-8, how do those configure with the collaborative classrooms, and we want them for all, or we thought about that?
Yeah, the standing desks are pretty easily movable and customizable, right? They actually raise up and down at different levels, which helps support collaboration in different kinds of projects, as well as really supporting student engagement, which collaborative classrooms are designed also to do. The idea is when students are working with each other and talking to each other, it really centers and lifts up the voices of students and decenters the voices of teachers in a classroom discussion, which a lot of research suggests really supports student engagement. So I think the standing desks, have a place. We have actually a pretty significant supply of those, and many of them are in grades that currently don't lift them very high. So they could be sort of reconfigured and repurposed for middle school spaces, where I think when the actual bodies of our students really start to vary in size, the standing desks become much more important. I myself cannot any longer fit this body into standard school-sized desks, and so it is distracting as a learner when you can't sit comfortably or you can't fit in a space. So I think the standing desk provides some flexibility in that regard.
And we actually took on that project for a purpose when those desks were offered to us. And not to sidetrack the conversation, but at some point we are to hear back its benefit, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I would say anecdotally, and in combination with several other things, positive behavior, school climate, restorative justice, student success coaches, the unconditional expectation coach. But if you look at the pretty significant downward trend over the last few years at Bayside MLK in terms of behavior incidents, and the beginning trend upwards in terms of student achievement, you might be able to draw some anecdotal conclusions that those were at least supportive of those changes.
Thank you.
Right. I don't know if this is the right place to bring this up, but maybe later in the meeting, but I took the Excel spreadsheets that were sent to us, of course I did, and added some columns and kind of put into those columns based on these tiers, and then putting deferred maintenance, compliance, retiring the COP debt. I guess that's in tier 1. So I don't know, outside financing we have in tier 3. Oh, that's additional financing. Okay, never mind. So tier 1, and then picking up some of the health and safety. So if I included portables, rehabbing the buildings, safe pathways, which would include stream daylighting, resurfacing parking lots and driveway and the play structures, but not including the fields, admin building, MPR, pre-K, play area, or specialist classroom, excluding all of those. If you took the first set and you took both of the plans, one in Nevada Street and Phillips Drive, and the COP, we're already at 37 million. And if you took both plans too, we're at 36.8 million. So there's not a whole lot of room up to our 41 million to add fields, admin building, MPR upgrades, pre-K building, specialist classrooms. And that said, there are some duplications between the deferred maintenance and some of the newer structures that might not be quite that high. But to me, I wanted to do some of the numbers to make sure that 41 million is justified based on just our tier 1 and 2 requirements. And I don't think we can get around doing tier 1 and 2 together in this bond. And if we can pick up some things in tier 3, I consider that a bonus. But we're going to need the whole 41 million just to cover tiers 1 and 2.
Thank you for doing that analysis, Caroline, and I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to share it.
I
sent it to Yoko and Ida.
Yeah.
As the ad hoc bond committee at like an hour and a half ago. So
okay, that's great. So I was wondering too, when we're replacing the portables, if we can be looking at some of those sort of more creative classroom ideas, and more, whether it's collaborative or some maker spaces or things like that. I just, I don't really have a sense. If we're, if for example, we need to take down some of the portables and build up some more, our architects can let us know if there's some flexibility there, or adding an extra courtroom, or doing, sorry.
You're a lawyer.
You know where I'm coming from.
Yes.
Classroom or something is possible. So, I don't know how that fits, but at any rate, I mean, it seems to me that if we're having to really replace those for just to be practical and avoiding big maintenance costs in the future, it seems like we should be designing them so they will meet more of the vision that I think people are identifying. And I don't, things like outdoor spaces, I don't have a sense of how, we talked about last week. I mean, it doesn't sound like it would be enormously expensive to have good outdoor learning spaces, but I don't know.
It's a good point. And I think, Caroline, that we do have to, look at, again, thank you for doing the cost estimate worksheet. I did have an opportunity to look at it. You did include the COP as well, correct?
Yeah, and I just updated it to 3.1. I think I initially had 2.5 in there.
Okay, yeah. Money goes really fast when you're looking at projects and what needs to be done, I think that it's just so challenging for everyone, for our families, for homeowners, for all that is involved. And but I think that to have spaces and facilities that may have a longer term in life, and to be able to have quality spaces where our children are safe and parents don't have to worry about buildings that are still on our properties from 1945 and dilapidated properties, that it does cost. And so I believe there's been discussion, Dr. Garcia is having discussion with partners that will come in and perhaps take on some of these projects, such as the field. Like maybe that's not the ideal place to start, if you will, but at some point down the road, that could be something that just comes off of the district's checklist, or we may not have to put a lot of money into it, or whatever the case may be. But with all that said, yes, if we looked at just doing tier 1, which in my opinion is something that really needs to happen, when we had that discussion that whatever bond that floats, if a bond is going to float this year, we're not going to cover everything. But the most important things, which is that deferred maintenance, and looking at your cost estimate sheet, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for the, just for tier 1, was it 17 million for both? For just tier 1?
Tier 1 wasn't that much. It was just tier 1. Well, tier 1 here is different than tier 1 on the cost estimate. So we've got some nomenclature differences. Tier 1 on the cost estimates are just the ADA improvements. Tier 1 here, I didn't break it out based on this tier 1, but DSA and the code issues and deferred maintenance are about 15 million between the two campuses. And then if you added in replacing the portables, depends on, there's for the Phillips Drive campus, there's two different cost estimates. One's about 7 million with 8 classrooms, and one's 4 million. I assume those are fewer classrooms, so it depends on which one you pick. So it would be on top of the 15 million. And then for the Nevada Street campus, depends on if you do 1 or 2 sets of classrooms. But because I think a second set was in case you redo the NPR and you get those classrooms on top are gone. But if you just did the 1 set of classrooms, that was another 3 million. So it's 7 to 11 million just for the portables. Then plus another 3 million.
On top of the, on top of the 15.
Yeah, so another 15, right? So 15 just to do the codes and DSA and deferred maintenance, and 15 to replace the portables and retire the COPs. You're at 30 already.
Got it.
Well,
all right.
I am not shocked at all by that, because we were given guidance last year that it would be $31 million just to do deferred maintenance. So
right.
I think the fact that, we're thinking about new ways to deal with that is a really encouraging sign, and, actually building some structures that will move us into the future seems really important. And I think all of that, and absolutely paying down the loan so that we're not continuing to make interest payments on that seems to me, very prudent fiscal choice, so that we have that $200,000 freed up for actual work in the classroom and everything that needs to happen there. So, so as I said, I'm not shocked, and I'm delighted that it seems like we may be able to get better services than we anticipated with that guidance last year.
And you had a comment earlier, I agree with that, Bonnie. You had a comment earlier about the maker spaces and the collaborative classrooms. My understanding is that those are essentially, you can either rehabilitate your existing structures or you could build it into your new structures. So those don't have to be necessarily new construction. I think the makerspace science lab are probably easier with new construction, but you can do it with either. And correct me if I'm wrong, the folks here from WLK.
I believe you are right about that.
Yeah.
And existing classrooms in buildings that don't need the same kind of modernizing dollars also can be converted to STEAM classrooms and maker spaces as well. It just all depends on what you want to go for, how flexible the space is, how collaborative the classroom is, what kind of materials you want in there. You want 3D printers, that kind of thing. Retiring the COP debt also annually is the equivalency of two FTE classroom teachers every year, and would really put money back in the classroom. Any other questions? I think I heard some guidance around particularly reorganizing tier 3, bringing the specials entertainment up to the top, followed by pre-K, and then leaving outside financing where it is and putting admin buildings at the bottom. Any other adjustments to this list?
The one caveat with the admin buildings, while it's scored low in the rankings, There's a difference, I think, between the admin buildings on the Phillips Drive campus and the one on the Nevada Street campus. The one on the Nevada Street campus, I consider more part of health and safety, and bringing that towards the bottom of the campus for drop-offs. The other benefit is that we could potentially tap into the insurance money for that. But the district office, we could potentially tap the insurance money too there, but that isn't necessarily as aligned with health and safety as the one in the Nevada Street campus. So I don't know if we want to split those two between the two campuses and put them under different priorities.
Or maybe we could say site admin versus district admin.
Yeah, there you go.
That's good.
That works.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
And I mean, when we talk about outside financing, I think what we're saying is that there are a whole lot of things that we would like to do that we can't afford even with a $40 million bond that the community, everybody thinks is valuable, but that our goal is to reach out to potential partners, whether it's for the field or for housing or for the, better gym or whatever it is, right? That's no matter what, however, that we will continue to try to seek out that funding and utilize whatever we can. But as we were informed, it makes a whole lot of sense to me is sometimes you have to come up with a match or you have to come up with something to be able to get that additional outside funding.
What about, sorry, did you have?
Nope, that was it. I just.
So we've got paving and pedestrian paths, and we've got, so I don't know where that would fit on here, like the parking, the EVA paving and pedestrian paths. That's
I would recommend those are all safety improvements.
okay. And then what about, we've got a big ticket item here on the Nevada Street campus. Upper classroom modernization is 10 million, plus lower campus roofs and gutters, upper campus roofs and gutters. Would that be tier 1 deferred maintenance?
Yes, it would.
Yeah. So I would add that to my original 15 million for the deferred maintenance portion, because I don't know all what's included in that 10 million modernization. That's quite a bit of money for upper campus, but anyway,
So
that would put us over 40.
You did add it, or you would need to add it?
I would need to add it to that original 15 million.
Oh gosh. Okay.
So we're at 40 right there.
Oh. Yeah,
So
this is.
Long story short, 41 million will get us. We'll tick off some items on the list. More important things, though, really important things that are just way beyond their time.
Yeah, well, and the longer we leave deferred maintenance, the more expensive it's going to get, right? And the longer we have to just keep paying on interest on this bond or the loan. That's
the alternatives. If we have to do this in the interim, is other kinds of debt that take money out of our operating budget, and we
Exactly.
don't want to do any more of that.
Exactly. But we know that by not taking care of the properties, it only gets more expensive over time, and B, it's not safe for the kids. And there's, besides just general care, I mean, that's a potential liability that we should be taking care of.
Right. And I think it was Scott Walker's point last time, he's on the Fit Tag group. I don't think we've quantified this yet, but obviously we do pay deferred maintenance out of our operating budget. And the hope is to repair those buildings that require the most from our operating budget to decrease that draw. And so there's, besides retiring the COP debt, there's that advantage as well on our operating budget.
Right.
Yeah, and to streamline our operating budget even more, I think will have a negative connotation to our kids and to our delivery to the educational process. So, but if we can retire that COP, I mean, that would be nice. And Remind me if I'm correct, Caroline. I think maybe a meeting or two ago, what came up is there was always this plan of retiring the COP with floating another bond.
That's right.
Which would have happened had that one from 2016 or
Right.
yeah, had that one floated.
Yep.
So
That's right.
we do have some old structures on both properties, you know, the portables. Retiring that COP debt would be great.
Yep. Agreed.
Well, I guess I think it's clear that we have a vision for where we want to go. And this is a really important interim step that I'm sorry, Ted, that we're not going to be able to, you know, and as you pointed out, that this is, you know, we'll have to take this sort of step by step over time. But I think what we're talking about are just some of the really critical things that need to happen in the short, you know, just to maintain our fiscal responsibility.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, well, I will make those updates to this list before we bring it back again. And so I want to get into a few of the other items. There had been a question of how much this bond might cost taxpayers. And remember that it's $30 per $100,000 of assessed valuation of the property. And that assessed valuation is tied to Prop 39. So folks that bought their homes in our area in the 70s and 80s are likely to be down in the $400,000 or $300,000 of assessed valuation if they haven't made significant home improvements. And so we're talking about a $60 or a $90 annual increase there. Once you get into some newer homes, some higher end homes, if your home's valued at $500,000 or $600,000, you're in the $150, $180 range, or about $15 a month to take care of this deferred maintenance and make the schools healthy and safe. And then with some of our higher end homes in Sausalito, you may see as much as a $600 annual increase if your home's worth around $2 million, or about $50 a month. Any questions there?
Yeah, Toko, I just need some clarity. So this is if you had your home appraised and it comes under any of these assessed valuation. For instance, there are pole homes that were built here in Marin City back in the 60s. Some of those same homes today sell for $700,000-800,000, you know, close to $1 million. So I'm just kind of confused on the math. I don't know where there's a home that has an assessed valuation of $100,000 in this area. Maybe there is. I don't know where they are.
So there's a difference between an appraisal and an assessed valuation. The assessed valuation is the cost that you paid for your home when you bought it, based on Prop 39.
13.
Yeah, thank you. Prop 13.
Okay.
And then any improvements that you've done to the land or the property, then the Marin County tax assessor will come out and do an assessed valuation of your property, right? And so that's how, while you're right, I don't think you can find a piece of property anywhere in the 94965 in the $100,000 range. There certainly are, for folks that have owned their homes for a long time, homes that on the tax rolls are in the $300,000 and $400,000 range.
Thank you for that clarification.
Abel, did you want to add something to that, sir? You're
Steve,
muted.
can you unmute him?
Okay, thank you. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you explained it perfectly, and I don't have anything to add. Other than, I think that when we looked at this last time, I think the average assessed valuation in the median assessed valuation in the district was right around $800,000. So it's about $20 a month for the average homeowner is what this program at a $30 tax rate would be the cost for the median homeowner. And I would just say that it's not just single family residences. So if there's a vacant parcel of land, for example, commercial property, other property that is assessed by the county, so it's not just homes, it's all taxable assessed property in the district.
I'm curious, we're gonna look at this on the timeline. When we look at, when these bonds might be issued in different series, A, B, C, whatever. So say you issue Series A, well, let's say the voters approve this. Are these amounts going to be shown on your tax bill immediately? Or is it after you issue a portion of this bond as a series, that you will see some of these amounts or all of these amounts, and how does that work? Abel's muted again. Abel.
Yeah, I think I asked him that question, Caroline. I thought that you may have been within the email that he addressed an answer to that question.
No, I did not see that.
Oh, okay. Dr. Garcia, recall?
I do, but I'll let Abel field that question, and then if I have anything to add, I will.
Yeah, thank you. So, very good question. Let's say if we're successful this November and bonds are issued, let's say sometime in the first quarter of next year, that $30 assessment of the $30 per $100,000 of assessed valuation assessment doesn't hit till the next fiscal year. So it's at least 2021, 2022 is when it would come on the tax roll for the district.
And that's if we issue within that year.
That's correct.
Okay, so maybe the impacts of COVID may be not gone, but less severe by the time we issue these bonds and folks start seeing this on their tax bill.
It will definitely be somewhat of a delay on people's tax bills. And, there also may be a scenario where, we take six or 9 months to issue the bonds. Maybe we don't issue them in quarter one, we issue them in quarter three, depending upon the bond market forecast and how that might affect the revenue that we get from the sale of the bonds. And if we were to delay, then that would push out the payments to taxpayers potentially even farther. And so point being is it would not be an immediate impact.
Right. So us approving this resolution, it going to the voters, only allows us to issue bonds in order to gain funding for the capital improvements that we need to do and deferred maintenance. So it's not, we approve this, the voters approve it, and you immediately are taxed.
That's right.
So
there's a subsequent action that would have to take place. The board would have to come back, adopt documents, authorizing the issuance. We'd look at the calculations again, what the tax rate would be, and then the board would make that decision at that time. But a successful election does not automatically mean that that this is going to hit the tax roll. That's within the control of the board and the district as to when it wants to do that.
And how much too.
And how much, exactly.
Right, and depending upon which projects you seek as priorities. Maybe it's one campus, maybe it's both campuses, who knows where we are at that point. Okay, thank you very much.
And
Right.
Bill, can you clarify for me the fact that people can opt out of, having to pay for a bond? How does that work?
So unfortunately, a general obligation bond is different than maybe what you're thinking about as a parcel tax. So oftentimes by law, parcel taxes, you can create senior exemptions, for example. So if you're a low-income senior, you can be exempted from that parcel tax. That feature does not exist for general obligation bonds. But for example, this tax is only assessed on property owners. It's not necessarily assessed directly on renters in the community.
Okay, thank you so much. I was, just had that thought because, the last time that we was on this platform, we had some folks who had some concerns regarding, having to once again be levied another tax. And I certainly, respect and feel for those individuals. But the flip side of that is a public education is so essential to our kids to make sure that they have a level playing field to come into a space that we are today as adults, and we have to have good facilities, safe facilities for that to happen. And I was just wondering if people were able to opt out, but you cleared that up, and so thank you for that. All right, Dr. G.
All right. And so wanted to also share, oh, sorry about that, wrong attachment. I actually am going to, at this point, turn it over to Dr. Clark and to our bond counsel, and then I'll come back with the last item.
Thank you. And before they come on the line, we're going to wait until we've discussed this entire item before we invite the public in for comment?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Garcia. David Kaznoka is with us tonight. He's our bond counsel. He's going to present the draft resolution for the board, and we'll take input. The goal is tonight to finalize any changes to the resolution itself, and then we'll bring that back on Wednesday night for board consideration and board action. So I believe David is there somewhere.
Yes.
There's David. Hi, David.
Hi, Robert. Thanks. So let me just remind you of things you may already know. That being, in order to place a bond on the ballot, the district has to deliver a properly written election order, which has been approved by 2/3 supermajority of the board, which for a 5-member board is 4 yes votes. The election order takes the form of a resolution, which is a draft of the resolution that you have before you. And the resolution has 3 essential parts. The text of the resolution itself, which other than the whereas clauses, as you read through page 1, generally recites the various election and education code requirements to place a measure on the ballot. The most important section of the text is section 1, in which the $41,600,000 is identified, coupled with the request that the ballot question and the full ballot text / bond project list be printed in the voter pamphlets. So if you turn your attention to Exhibit A of the resolution, this is the ballot question, which in its current form, if you approved it, would go to the voters for a yes or no vote. So there's the resolution. So scroll down to Exhibit A. So here's the ballot question. So here's the law with respect to the writing of the ballot question is that it has to be a single sentence that ends in a question mark, that identifies the name of the school district, the purposes of the bond measure, the amount of the bond measure, the tax rate expected to be imposed, the amount of the annual tax levy collected, the duration of the tax, and acknowledge that there are certain features of Proposition 39 that are applicable to this measure. So you can see right in the center the name of the district. You can see in the first 3 lines the purposes of the measure. This is the same ballot question that was tested in the voter opinion survey, which it did quite well. The magic words in the first 4 lines are the words repair, construct, acquire, classrooms, equipment, sites, and facilities. Those are the magic words because they instill a great deal of flexibility with respect to how the money gets spent. And there's probably not a project that the board wouldn't like to do, which one way or another would fall within the words repair, construct, acquire, classrooms, equipment, sites, and facilities. So we have the par amount of the bonds, 41.6. There's the requirement that I forgot to mention that the maximum interest rate on the bonds has to be disclosed. That's the phrase at legal rates. The tax rate is 3 cents per 100. That's the equivalent of $30 per 100,000. The annual revenue projected from the levy of that tax is $2.5 million a year. The duration of the tax is while bonds are outstanding. And the nod to Proposition 39 is a recognition that you're going to have citizen oversight committee, independent audits, and that the bond proceeds are prohibited from being spent for teacher or administrator salaries. So this is what the voters vote yes or no on. You go to the next exhibit. Because the measure is being proposed under the auspices of Proposition 39, there's a requirement that the district provide to the voters project list information describing the types of projects that the bond monies are going to be used for. What's most important to remember about Exhibit B, which, while it's going to appear in the sample ballot in its entirety exactly as you adopted, this project list does not necessarily, well, it does not at all, doesn't prioritize projects, it doesn't express decisions that have been made about the projects that you've just been discussing. The project list for bond purposes is the outer legal limits of what the board is authorized to spend the bond funds for. So it's very broad. It includes some specific items that have been in your facility assessment studies that I've read. And each of the projects that are described are, if you just keep scrolling through the list, they're organized by type. Here are some examples of school repair project. The bulleted points are examples of projects that we know from the voter opinion survey are highly desired by the registered voters of the district. Doesn't mean you're going to spend any money on any of these projects. It means you're authorized to spend monies on these projects. And as you go through this version of the bond project list, you probably will be quick to realize there's a lot more described than $41.6 million worth of projects. So the board is not deciding on how they're going to spend $41,600,000 by adopting this resolution. These are the types of projects that you're authorized to spend money on. As you get below the asterisks that appear on the page that's on the screen, this is a much longer minutia description of very typical deferred maintenance, small capital repair projects that are authorized to be funded with the bond. Included on those pages are the refinancing of outstanding lease obligations, which is the legal authority to prepay the certificates of participation that you've been discussing. So this document is going to be printed in the sample ballot, along with the tax rate statement that I'm sure you're going to look at in a second, as well as the ballot arguments in favor and opposition to the measure, if there are any, along with a county council's impartial ballot analysis. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the wording of the resolution or the purposes of the resolution or what binding or non-binding consequences there are to its approval. The overarching goal was to provide the board with the flexibility to change with the times and spend the bond monies on projects that come to you as the most important at the time you have access to the funds, not to prejudge or constrain you in some way, so that the determinations as to what actually the money gets spent on would be for the board to decide as bonds get sold over the years.
Ani, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I understand that the idea of being able to pay off the COP is included in the idea, as I understand it, of the maintenance. But I'm wondering, when I read Exhibit A, I thought that we might want to make some mention of that, because I will say it wasn't. I would not have guessed that we were planning on paying off a old loan as part of that discussion.
Yeah, I couldn't find it either, so that was my question as well.
The location of the description is on page B4 in the carryover paragraph, 6 lines up from the bottom of this carryover paragraph. I think you have to scroll up just a little higher.
Toko, it actually, I think it rolls over to the bottom of B3. It's like the 4th line from the bottom on B3 with this formatting.
Okay, so maybe
David,
the
you see it
pagination.
there?
So there it is, reduction or retirement of outstanding lease obligations. So there are some districts who do this, who include it in the 75-word statement, for sure. 95% of the districts don't do it. And I think their motivation is, if that were a project that were tested in the voter opinion survey, it would test very low. It would not be a high priority for most voters, because I think that most voters would say, oh, you've already had that money, you've spent that money. I don't understand the relief to the general fund. It requires an explanation. But there are a handful of districts where we've included it in the 75-word statement. You're at 75 words now. So if you wanted to direct me to make that change, some of the words that currently show up in Exhibit A in the first 2.5 lines would have to be deleted. So we'd have to cut
So Trustee Huff, I think where you're headed is that you want to call it out a little bit more specifically to retire the COP debt. So if that's true, we could put it, David, couldn't we put it somewhere in Exhibit B as one of the bullets?
Yes, I mean, I think your choices are in the 75-word statement, or highlight it more prominently in Exhibit B by having it added as a bullet point project of equal status with the ones that are bullet pointed already.
I would be more comfortable with that, because I feel like we're making a, I will say I personally feel like I'm making a commitment to pay that off. And since I looked, I admit I did not look word for word through all of the language in B as carefully as I might have. But I don't think we should be asking the voters to do that either. It's hard enough to see it on a screen. And it was the thing that sort of jumped out at me when I was reading through it. So,
And the bullet points just come out.
yeah.
Clearly, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they sure do.
Yeah, I agree to add it to the bullet point list, and I don't see adding it to the voter language.
Right.
primarily because it's $3 million, and $3 million is not, not a small amount of money. It's only 7% of the bond amount. If it was 50% or 25%, and a huge portion of this bond was going to go to that, I might be more inclined to put it in the vote in the ballot language. But I think by calling it out in the bullet point list, at least it is more clear that a portion of this bond will go towards that.
Okay, so I could use the words retire outstanding lease obligation as a bullet point in the first section of the project list under the school repair and upgrade projects. Maybe after replace deteriorating heating, ventilation, cooling systems, and before repair leaky roofs, we'll have a bullet that says retire outstanding lease obligation. Does that sound okay?
Works for me.
What do you think, Caroline?
Sure. So I'm just trying to guess whether would it really go as a repair?
Well, what were the proceeds of the COPs used for?
They were primarily building the brand new modular buildings on the Phillips Drive campus.
Well,
if I may, Mr. Casnocha, perhaps it goes well on the second bulleted list because it will help us combat inequalities in funding for schools by allowing for more money to be available in the general fund.
Yes.
That sounds fine. If you looked at the second grouping of projects and you can see the line of projects listed, do you have a preference to where in the hierarchy of the bullet points it appears?
I think the fact that it appears is it shows transparency. But I just want to be clear that it wasn't the word repair, but retire.
It's retire. The word is retire, right?
And I said repair because you were suggesting to put it under the repair section initially, and I thought it should go somewhere else.
So David, since the COP money was used to build the modulars, which was really about new construction, what about if it just went at the very end of the list? Because it's the very last bullet is replace outdated portable classrooms with permanent facilities. And that's essentially what we did is we built permanent facilities with the COP.
Right.
Would that work?
Yes, it would work. It probably wouldn't be my choice only because most readers read the first bullet point and the last bullet point and skip a lot of what's in between. And since the retirement of outstanding lease obligations is generally speaking not a popular use of bond funds for most voters, it typically isn't listed first and it isn't listed last. It's listed in between.
Or if you put it right before the last one.
Yeah.
Or even the third from the bottom, because the second from the end is upgrading construct enrichment classrooms.
Right.
Why don't we put it second from the bottom?
Okay.
Below upgrade and above replace outdated portables.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to make that change. I'm going to delete it from page B3, I guess, in your.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
So is it proper to say that we're retiring the lease obligation to free up money for classroom usage, or do we just?
You can say that if you would like to say retire outstanding lease obligations.
Used to construct new classrooms to free up to whatever.
No, well, I was just thinking to say, I mean, why are we trying to reduce the goal of retiring those lease obligations is to allow more money to be spent on actual education, but I don't know that we need it. I'm just.
Well, I think we could say retire outstanding lease obligations to enhance classroom instruction. or to retire a standing lease obligation to
In order to
save.
combat inequalities in funding.
That's fine too. Whichever. But
Is
the
it helpful?
purposes, the benefits, it's commonly used. So which would you prefer? The combating inequality, inequities, or something else?
I mean, maybe it's fine just on its own. I think we've already talked about equity in other parts of this, but.
What about something about reducing the burden on the general fund?
I'm afraid if we start getting into that, it kind of goes towards, well, you said you're not going to be using this bond money for teacher salaries.
Right. Okay. Maybe we just leave it as is and talk about retiring the lease obligation.
I mean, I would be more inclined to say retiring the lease obligation, and somehow linking that to the construction of new classrooms, and describe how that debt came about.
As opposed to just letting it stand on its own.
Yeah, but I could be talked out of it.
I would recommend just retiring the debt, retiring the lease obligations. That's what I've seen more in the past. My concern is down the road. If we put anything that might be associated with it, someone might come back and say, oh, by the way, you paid off that COP, you're saving $192,000 a year. Show me where you're spending $192,000 on some project that reinforces the bond work. So the more you give the details, the more we're going to be held to that detail in the language.
Or interpretation of it.
Or interpretation, absolutely, right.
Okay.
So, as is.
As it does. Retire the lease obligation.
Are there other comments or things that stand out at you for looking a little off or want to get moved around?
B2, towards the top, page B2. Second paragraph, it says, our schools are the center of our community and offer the best opportunity for our children to succeed, yet they have less funding than schools in some other nearby communities. I'm not sure that's true.
The derivation of these words came from the voter opinion survey that was taken. Belle might be able to comment on it, but these messages that are called goals and purposes were tested in the survey and found that the community responded quite favorably, knowing the content of what's said.
Okay, so what's the context of that then?
So the context of that is that the language that we tested was specifically the tax rate that is being levied in South Salida Marin City. The highest tax being levied is in San Rafael Elementary School District. It's $76.50. And South Salida Marin City, by comparison, has a current tax rate of about $16 per 100,000. So it has the lowest tax rate in Marin County. And I think that's what that is being referenced to.
So it's less capital funding rather than
correct.
Operating funding.
And then the other piece I just wanted to add to give you context, I think you're on the right track with the COP. The language that we tested was specifically stated, and this tested about 78% much or somewhat more likely. Specifically, the language that we used was reduce the district's annual operating costs by eliminating costly leases to help restore needed funding for educational programs.
Right. And how did that test?
78%,
Okay.
much more likely, somewhat more likely.
So was there a reason on that particular paragraph that Caroline pointed out that, it wasn't expanded upon more in stating that it's tax-based and not
Yeah, yeah, yet they have less funding than schools in some other nearby communities. I mean, I don't, we have the highest per student funding, but
Well, we could say the
don't
word
have as high
facility
capital
funding.
funding.
We could add the word facility if that's what Abel's survey focused on, as opposed to educational apportionment monies.
Well, it is also true, you know, that we are down currently at $16 per 100,000 of assessed value, and that is one of the 3 lowest districts in the county. And that since 1940 we have passed 1 facilities bond.
Right, and I get that part. I just, the way I read this, I think of operating funding, not capital funding.
I see.
So David offered to add the word facilities. So have less facilities funding than other schools. Would that work?
That
I
works
think it
for me.
helps.
Yeah.
I agree.
Thanks, David.
Did you have another comment, Caroline?
Val, does that fit with the polling?
It does. Thank you for
Okay.
that observation.
Okay, thank you. No,
So-
that was my only comment.
Thank you. I have a question of clarification. Just a little confused by a sentence here. It's on page B4. It's right before fiscal accountability, like the paragraph before. It says proceeds of the bond may be used to pay or reimburse the district for the cost of district staff when performing work on or necessary and incidental to bond projects. And I just wanted to get some clarity on that.
All right, so if you remember when Proposition 39 got passed,
I
it said
don't.
that there is no bond funds allowed for teacher or administrator salaries. So at that time, in the year 2000, people weren't really sure what that meant. They weren't sure whether administrators was meant to include staff salaries. And so in 2004, the Attorney General was asked for an interpretive opinion as to what that prohibition meant. And the Attorney General said that if a district employee meets the but-for test, but for measure X, that employee would not be performing the tasks in connection with a project. That person is not an administrator, and that person's salary and benefits and overhead could be paid because but for the bond, that person, whether it's secretarial, project oversight, business, superintendent to a degree, involved in the administration or execution of a bond project, meeting the but-for test, that's an authorized expenditure. And so I have this sentence in here to remind the public and to remind the Bond Oversight Committee that if the district were to decide, it's not obligated, but if they were to decide that some staff salaries of persons who are assigned to work on bond projects should be paid out of bond funds as opposed to the general fund, you have the right to do it. And we were transparent in letting the world know that we were legally authorized to do it. And it's a good reminder to have this sentence in for the Oversight Committee that that is a lawful use of bond funds.
That was a great question, Ida.
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, I was reading the document and I just thought, wow, why is that there? So thank you for thank you for that explanation. It's very helpful.
And very, very clear explanation. Thank you.
Dr. Clark?
Yes. Do you have a question for me?
No, I mean, I don't know unless, you know, the other trustees have any more questions on this document.
No, it's thorough. Thank
We
you.
can push on.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to reinforce, I think part of the guidance was that if we don't go for something broad, if something comes up that we need to handle, we want to be able to handle it. If, whatever, the next crazy COVID, whatever thing that happens, we need to have that flexibility. Although we are establishing clear priorities for how we're planning to use this fund, right?
So, to your point, I'll give you a really short example. A lot of bonds will go on for 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 years, depending on the authority and then the amounts that are issued. In that amount of time, priorities sometimes can change. And some things come up that you didn't know anything about. A previous district of mine had an enrollment growth, and we weren't planning to build, brand new schools. And sure enough, we had to. So had that language not been in the bond, we wouldn't have been able to use bond funds to construct new elementary schools. So the more freedom, the more flexibility we have now in 2020 will only help us down the road as priorities or things might come up. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so between our initial meetings, the meetings with that we had with the bond work or the facilities work group, which Marika was a part of, who's got huge breadth of experience in these areas. All of your descriptions are bond prioritization, and also seeing the estimates and kind of how we have to prioritize spending, just because of what's, there's so much low-hanging fruit as far as what needs to get done. I have a greater comfort level with a more general list than I previously did. And as well as recognizing this is under a unified school model, and that it's for all our children. And between the two campuses, is my hope that there's more trust of the public in how these funds will be spent. And plus there's another process we have to go through between deciding what projects these are going to be spent on, how much to issue. And so there's going to be plenty of time for more public input and board deliberation over future projects. So I thank everybody for their patience and me coming around and being more comfortable with this broad list. So thank you.
Yeah.
So I want to give you one more ounce of advice, and that is, to the degree that you think there might be opposition to the bond, it is a true statement that tax-exempt bonds can't be used for deferred maintenance as a phrase. Deferred maintenance is an operational expense, and bonds are for capital projects. And so for those districts who have a long deferred maintenance need, those lists are typically recharacterized as small capital repair projects. So it's better to start adding to the vernacular of small capital repairs or capital repairs and less dependence on the word deferred maintenance, because a critic will stand up and accuse you of misusing bond funds for an operational expense if everyone is talking about maintenance being funded with the bond.
You're right. And that's a really incredibly important distinction. And we certainly need to consider that going forward and looking at our prioritizations, as well as the description of the work to be done. Because I do remember that from the last bond, that it is it's important that terminology is incredibly important. So when we look at our guiding principles, we've got in it deferred maintenance as a description in tier 1. So we're going to want to
change that
and make sure it reflects. I mean, really what deferred maintenance to me is, your air conditioning needs some repair or something, just a small, it's your ongoing
capital repair
to your campus, as opposed to what we've got, which is reconstructing, rebuilding, rehabbing our campus. So thank you for that clarification. I think that's very important going forward.
Yeah, that's great advice. And they are capital repairs. So it's good to circle back and make and change the wording. So
yeah. And
thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I think to Dr. Clark's point, the fact that we had an awful lot of parents indicate that they might want their kids to be in TK indicates that we probably may have to start thinking about larger, classrooms and whatever for that cohort of kids, which is great. That's where we want to go. But maintaining that and seeing how that develops will be really important.
Absolutely. That's like a new construct, because
Like.
you cannot put preschoolers on. I don't think there's anywhere on our properties that you can robin's nest. I think they work, and that building needs work.
It 1945.
Yeah.
Same time as the annex. Those were new back then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So Dr. Garcia, Dr. Clark, I don't know who's pushing us on to the next subject.
I will bring us up to the tax statement for a potential bond measure. So this is language that would accompany the language from the resolution in the ballot measure. And it outlines how the 41.6 million in bonds, if they're authorized and sold, principal and interest on the bonds would be payable only from the proceeds of the ad valorem tax levies made upon the taxable property in the district. And so it outlines the projections and estimates. The best estimate of the average annual tax rate to be required to be levied to fund this bond is 3 cents per $100 or $30 per 100,000 of assessed value. And the final fiscal year in which tax is anticipated to be collected is 2049, 2050. So doing that math, that's about a 30-year lifespan. The best estimate of the highest tax rate which would be required to be levied to fund this bond issue, again, 3 cents per 100 or $30 per 100,000. And it's estimated that such a rate would be levied starting in the fiscal year 21-22.
I thought we said earlier 2021 could be the earliest if we issued.
If we issued in spring of 2021, it wouldn't be levied until the December and April tax bill of 21-22.
Okay, yeah. So we misspoke earlier that it's not 2021 tax bill. The soonest it would come on is 21-22.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the best estimate of the total debt service, including principal and interest, that would be required to be repaid if all the bonds are issued and sold, is approximately $77,293,000. The estimated tax rate, again, is based on this concept of assessed value, not the market value of taxable property. So going back to that conversation that we were having earlier about the distinction between an appraisal or a market value and an assessed value, which is done by the county assessor's office. And Abel, the county assessor can add $7,000 per year to assessed value. Is that right?
Actually, you can, so the average homeowner, if you live in your home, you have a $7,000 exemption. So let's say your property is assessed at $800,000. Because you live in your home, you're allowed up to $7,000 exemption. So that reduces your tax rate assessed valuation to $693,000 as opposed to $700,000 in that example. So there is an exemption that's available for homeowners to reduce your total tax liability because you live in your home.
Yeah, and they can increase your tax assessed value 2% per year maximum. depending upon, what is it, the CPI, the county CPI, California CPI.
It's based on it's 2% of the assessed value that gets increased per year, and that's something that the county assessor does on annual basis.
But if so, but I think it's like if CPI isn't up to 2%, they can levy less than 2% as well as an increase.
Yeah, the maximum is 2%, but no more than 2% currently.
Right. So during the recession, we saw no increases. And if anything, people were having sometimes their homes revalued and the assessed value decreased when the market went into free fall. But we're not anticipating that going forward, but maximum 2%, it could be less.
That's right. So I just wanted to add that this statement would also appear in the ballot, the text of the ballot measure that would be published along in the sample ballot, along with Exhibit A and Exhibit B that was referenced.
I was going to ask you that question, so thanks for answering. If it was going to be printed in the ballot.
That's correct. It would be printed in the ballot. In the ballot booklet, excuse me.
With the 2021, the earliest people would see this on their tax bill would be the December 10th payment that's due in 2021.
Correct.
So a year and a half from now. Okay.
And Dr. Garcia or Abel, just for clarity, you're taxed on the amount that we would sell a bond for. So if we sold a bond for 15 million, that's what you're being taxed on.
That's correct. So whatever the amount, the issuance amount, that's the amount that you're actually taxed on. So it could be possible that for whatever reason, you decide you only need $5 million in the first tranche. Well, that's going to drastically reduce that estimate of 30 per 100,000, probably closer to $5 or $6 per 100,000. But that's a determination that's made into the future based on what the needs are of the district. Right now, we're projecting 3 bond issuances over a 6-year period at the maximum rate of $30 per 100,000 of assessed valuation, based on current interest rate assumptions that we're making.
Thank you. Dr. Garcia, I don't know if we or if the timeline for the bond was lifted up. I don't recall seeing that.
Yes, I was going to finish that. Thank you.
Can I ask one question before we move to that? And this may be, but it may be relevant to those of us in Sausalito. So I'm a houseboat owner, and I actually pay my property taxes in August. So I would anticipate, depending on when things happen, that I might be. I think we would move that. We could move that quickly, right? Or
they're thinking issuance in April.
August of 2021 that your tax bill would increase, Bonnie.
That would be the earliest, right? Probably. Yeah. I just think, in terms of when things get.
That's interesting.
It's not it, but I'm just thinking because I am not the only person that lives on houseboats, and we may get asked that question. I would like to be able to answer it. So.
Yeah. I had no idea that houseboats had a different timeline. That's fascinating.
Abel, is my assessment accurate?
So that's correct, Dr. Garcia. Both, and Bonnie makes a good point, both secured and unsecured taxable property is assessed. So we've been talking about homes that are secured to land, but there's also tax on unsecured property such as, planes, boats, that sort of thing, that the county assesses on a regular basis as well.
Interesting. Any other questions? All right. Well, I will move to some timelines. There was a request to lay out some timelines for some potential things. And This is a timeline for the facilities bond sale. You can see here, if we approve a bond to go on the ballot, and if the voters approve the bond, then this process sort of begins on November the 3rd. We would then determine the schedule of bond sales, form the bond oversight committee made of citizens. We'd want to try to do that no later than November 30th, 2021.
Wouldn't we do that in 2020? Based on the rest of the timeline?
Yeah, typo.
Well, everything else is 2021, but I do want to reiterate, much like the bond resolution and all of the other documents that we have created, a lot of it depends upon when we would decide to schedule the sale of the bonds.
So does the bond oversight committee need then to go further down the timeline if it's November 2021?
Well, we could. My recommendation would be to create the bond oversight committee earlier, right? Because you want to have them created. Yeah, that should be 2020. Thank you for that.
I was going to say you have 2021 there.
I don't know why it says that, because what you want is them to have them to work with districts and the board to finalize the project list.
No, I agree with that. So the date was confusing. So.
Yeah, my apologies. I'll fix that.
That's right. Okay.
And then potentially for selling Series A in June of 2021, Series B in 2023, and Series C in 2026. But again, these are estimates. We might, depending upon the valuation of the bond market, decide to sell Series B and Series C together, or Series A and Series B together. And we would work with our financial advisor and our bond oversight committee to determine the best course of action there.
I like the rocket launch symbol for that.
That's when everything gets started.
Can I just ask something about the oversight committee before we move on?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm going to ask David Kaznoka to kind of chime in about the role of the oversight committee. We have to be really careful, and I caution the board. The role of the oversight committee is oversight, not decision making, and not input, and not guidance. It's after the fact. They should not, typically do not form until after the bond is issued and there are expenses to review. So they are there to oversee the expenditures of the bond to make sure that we as a district are following the language of the ballot measure. Yeah,
they're like a little mini audit committee. It's really an audit function.
Absolutely. So they are after the fact. They don't provide input. We don't go to them to review a list of projects. It's always after.
But you can form the committee prior to.
Absolutely. You can form, and there's Prop 39 restrictions on the membership and who is actually part of the member of the oversight committee. My only caution is that if you form it too early, they sit for months doing absolutely nothing, and then you lose them. Right. So I don't know if David, if you're still there, if you want to add in anything about the oversight committee.
Well, I agree with Robert, what you said. The Bond Oversight Committee has the responsibility to review expenditures to determine that they were made in accordance with the measure and with Prop 39, to inform the public of their conclusions, and to prepare a written annual report for the board to review, which summarizes their work and their conclusions about the use of bond funds. I would further agree with Robert in noting that oversight committee members are typically appointed to 2-year terms and can serve 3 consecutive terms. So normally an oversight committee is not formed 6 months before you sell bonds, not for any particular reason other than 6 months of their 2-year term would have passed before they had a chance to do anything. And then you're off looking for new people to serve on the committee once their term expires. So again,
go ahead. Sorry.
All these are estimate dates. So as the election occurs and the district develops a bond funding plan for specific projects, because you only sell bonds for money that you can spend within 3 years. So you have to sign a certificate that you reasonably expect to spend all the bond funds within 3 years from the date of issuance. So you'll come up with your project list. I'll ask for a drawdown schedule of the bond funds. Abel does his financial analysis. There's a schedule prepared for the amount and timing of the bonds. But right in that timeline is the Bond Oversight Committee, and I'll provide you with bylaws and guidelines for the Oversight Committee. And there's an application process, a public notice requirement. They fill out an application form. The superintendent reviews the applications. There's 5 mandatory seats on the Oversight Committee for good distribution of expertise and experiences that are brought to the table for Oversight Committee members. But that will be an important part of the transparency and accountability from an audit perspective for the entire bond program.
Thank you. That's really helpful clarification. I would personally then suggest that we adapt this chart a little bit, because I looked at the timing and I assumed that that was just a typo, and clearly it was not. So I think if we can just shift that around a little bit, I may not be the only person with that confusion.
And then also, I'm interested in wanting to know, what does a bond oversight committee comprise of? Who specifically are those individuals that would be on such a committee?
Well, Bond Oversight Committee must have at least 7 members. 2 of those 7 are at large. 1 is a member of a bona fide taxpayer organization. 1 is a member of a senior citizen association. 1 is a member of a business association. So it's taxpayer, senior citizen, business, a parent of a student or guardian, and a parent or guardian of a student who's also active in a school site council or PTA or some site group, whether, I don't know what you call them, but PTA type, so active in a site council organization.
Thank you.
So one parent or guardian who may not be active and the other one who is active. Is that
right?
An accurate assessment?
You can have more than 7. The challenge of having more than the minimum requirement is they're subject to the Brown Act. You need a quorum to do business. So the more members you have, the more members you have to get to show up to have a quorum. You want to have an odd number so there's no 4-to-4 votes. And larger committees tend to be more unwieldy than smaller committees. So you balance having good representation within the community versus organizational efficiencies.
Great. Thank
Yep.
you.
I remember, little story aside, I remember when the last bond, actually, was it 2010 or so, and they're looking for bond oversight committee members, and I was considering joining. So there's my very first involvement in the district. But I think they were looking for like an accounting type person on that one too. So
That might be a good at-large person.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Dr. Garcia, to your timeline, it's that your BOC is not a typo. So 2020, the end of 2021, I think is probably a good time to get started. If we are headed to issuing the Series A somewhere in June or early fall of 21, we're going to need funds available before we go out to, go through the architect RFP process and architect selection. I would even wonder about how much to sell the first bond for, Abel, because the very first bond is going to be sitting there for a couple of years. We won't go through a ton of money doing architectural fees and DSA fees. It really will be construction. And that's going to be a few years out at best.
So would you put it, Robert, after the sell Series A on this draft?
The BOC?
Yes.
It already is. It comes first, but the dates come after.
Yeah, but visually it's really confusing. So that's why I'm
Yeah.
suggesting that we just
Yeah, I think we need to shift the order of the events.
Yeah. But I think and these are conversations, not to get too deep in the weeds, but these are conversations that will come back to the board. This is, as Dr. Garcia said, this is just a start.
Yeah.
Everything comes back to the board for discussion, the project list, the bond sale, everything requires board direction, board action before we do any work on these items at all.
Yeah, I see Series A not just being architecture and like the soft costs leading up to construction, but also COP. If we can pay that puppy off sooner than later, you know,
I
roll
totally
it into
agree.
Series A.
But to David's point earlier, you know, spending within 3 years, though I do remember if you had to spend 85% within 3 years. I don't know if that's
right. I didn't get into the minutia, but yeah, 85% is the test within 3 years.
So, but for us, the goal would definitely be to spend it. And if we can get our projects based on the tax scale, in the tax rate, in the AV growth in the community, you know, we could advance the bond sales, or we could extend them out depending on what's going on. And to Dr. Garcia's point, we don't need 3 issuances, because every time we issue, there's a cost to issue.
That's correct.
If we can eliminate an issuance and only have 2, that's a chunk of cash that we will go right back into the bond program itself.
Well, plus you got to consider interest rates too. You know,
Right.
it might be more advantageous to sell them sooner than later while rates are low.
Provided that we can spend the funds within those 3 years.
Right.
Yeah, Robert, are you saying that within 3 years you need to spend at least 80% of what you're asking?
I think technically you have to have an intent to spend the bond funds within 3 years.
Right.
An intent to spend the bond funds within 3 years.
Let me just state the rule for you. In order to qualify for the issuance of tax-exempt bonds, the district must sign a certificate in which they say, we reasonably expect to enter into binding contracts for at least 5% of the bond proceeds within 6 months of the date of issuance. We reasonably expect to move with due diligence towards the completion of our projects, and we reasonably expect to spend 85% of the bond proceeds by the 3rd anniversary of the issuance date. So it is a reasonable expectations test. If you're ever audited by the IRS and you ended up having spent 50% as opposed to 85%, well, then the IRS is going to challenge the reasonableness of your expectations. And if the reasonableness of your expectations doesn't survive an IRS audit, the IRS will have deemed those bonds to be taxable from their date of issuance and give you the opportunity of sending them a check equal to the lost revenues to the federal government for having had investors allow the interest deduction. And that fine is payable from the general fund, not from unspent bond proceeds. So there is legal due diligence associated with the reasonableness. It's not an intent to spend, it's the reasonable expectations to spend.
Thank you. We surely want to avoid that. David, can I just ask you another question for clarity, please? And that is on a bond oversight committee. The at-large person, can that be someone who doesn't have a child in the district? And can an employee be on a bond oversight committee?
Good questions.
So employees and vendors of the district cannot serve on the oversight committee.
Okay.
A member does not need to have a child in the district to serve as an at-large member. And a member does not need to reside within the boundaries of the district to serve on the oversight committee. So
Okay,
for example, if you had a member of the Marin County Taxpayer Association who happened to live in San Rafael, but they were willing to serve on your committee, they would be eligible to serve on your committee because they are a member of a bona fide taxpayer association. So residency is not a requirement. It would seem logical to me that it's a preference, you know, but it's not a legal requirement.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Okay. His timeline's been very helpful. Provide a lot of clarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're
I
just going to shift that one area, right, Dr. Garcia? We're going to shift.
I'm gonna take the
Bond oversight.
Bond Oversight Committee, and I'm going to move the project list back to where that Bond Oversight Committee is, move selling Series A bonds back to where the finalized project list is, and move Bond Oversight Committee to where the sell Series A bond is.
Wonderful, thank you.
And here we have, again, an estimate. It imagines selling the bonds in 2021, fiscal year 2021, and the taxes being assessed in December of 2021 and April of 2022 for the first time, and then imagines the Series B bond sale in 2023, the taxes on that Series B bond sale being assessed in December 2024 and April 2025, and then the Series C bond sale imagines being in 2026, and the taxes on the total amount being paid beginning in December of 2027 and April of 2028 on those tax rolls.
So the Series C bond, that seems like it's more than 3 years. That's, if we're looking at a 3-year.
Yeah, because that's less than 85%. So that C would either need to be less money
So
or
maybe I should clarify. When we say 3 years, so let's pretend that the Series A bonds were sold in June of 2021. By June of 2024, the proceeds of the Series A bond, 85% of those monies should have been spent.
got
It's
it.
a brand new test for the Series B bonds. So
Uh,
3 years from 2023, 85% of that series of bonds should be sold.
Got it.
And
Oh, by 2026, correct?
Yeah.
by 2026, and that 3 years from 2026 for the Series C bonds.
and so- thank you. So Itoko, given the comment that Bonnie made earlier, there are some people who will be taxed in April. Should should there be a
Or in
consideration?
August, I think.
Or August, yeah, in August. Should that not be a consideration here?
I think maybe what we could do is take the months off, and that would then make it accurate.
And
Most
just
people,
leave years?
yeah, in tax years, most people are aware when their property tax bills come due, but I guess maybe it's surprising for some folks.
Yeah, so just say 21-22 tax year.
Yeah. All right, I will make that change.
That's good.
And then again, this is a projected timeline for facilities design and construction. All of these things could change if we decided to do things differently. This imagines, what this does imagine is the action being taken in January 2021 is that we contract with an architectural firm. And that from January to May, the conceptuals and reports are drawn up. And that from February to June of 2021, that we engage in community engagement on the design and the final project list. And that by November of 2021, the designs for all the approved projects are completed, and that we take action as a board to approve those final designs. That would lead to a submission to the Department of State Architecture in January of 2022. And at the most optimistic estimate, a groundbreaking in June of 2023, and buildings being constructed from 2023 to 2025 with a ribbon cutting in September of 2025. Now, I do want to be very clear and transparent and caution everyone that Department of State architecture reviews can often take more than 18 months. Sometimes they can take 2 years. Sometimes they can take 2.5 years. And the best planned construction projects often have unforeseen things occur. I have seen really high quality school buildings built in a 2-year, 18-month time frame. And sometimes they take 2.5 years or 3 years. And again, so this just assumes sort of a best case scenario for a lot of the approvals.
So a couple of comments on this. When we did the modulars, one advantage of that construction was that, well, we had a short timeline. They had pre-DSA approval for those modular buildings. So not that we necessarily need to go that route, but it certainly shortens the timeline on DSA, for the DSA. So, if we're going to be constructing some new buildings, like perhaps the row of classrooms on the Nevada Street campus that replace the portables, we could consider modulars that are pre-DSA approved, which would significantly shorten the timeline. And so then another question is, for some of the capital upgrades that we need to make, for example, the interiors to the classrooms and lighting and siding and so forth, I don't think those fall within this timeline. This is for new construction, like stick-built type brand new construction. Is it true that some of the other projects, like replacing roofs and those types of things, those could be on a shorter timeline?
Yes, and all of those things still require DSA approval, and so while they might not take as long to build, probably the lead part of the timeline is accurate, unless, like you said, you're buying a modular building that already has approved DSA designs, and then you still need to, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Clark, but you still need to get DSA approval for some of what you can do is the foundational work, the soils work, the infrastructure, while you're waiting for DSA approval. But much of the access, concrete work, the ramps are all still going to require DSA approval, even on a modular building.
Correct.
Yes.
They have their hand in everything. Even if you do, to your point, Trustee Van Els, about doing some of the classrooms and redoing them and some roofs, all those things go to DSA.
Right.
Sometimes the review period of doing structural, fire, life safety, access, those three areas that they review, some move a little faster than others. And when you're only looking for one area, sometimes you can get through pretty quickly.
Open a little bit.
But you're still talking months.
Yeah, right, but not necessarily a year.
Not necessarily a year, but it also depends on when you get in. The end of the year, December, before the code changes in January, when people are trying to get in,
yeah,
it's really crazy and busy, and the DSA has changed their approval process to where now things just go in a bin. I mean, they really do go in a bin and pile up,
right.
And then they go through. And the days of the over-the-counter, I think, are pretty much gone, where you could just walk in, have an appointment, get them to approve something, sign off, and you were finished.
Right.
I don't think those happen anymore.
Yeah, and so my point there, though, before we move to the next slide, was that some of our capital improvement projects that would be better to do sooner than later to avoid continued maintenance costs could have a shorter timeline. But the more significant construction projects will more than likely follow this timeline.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a shorter timeline would be something like a DSA approved modular, if you
Right.
will.
Right.
And I don't know, I just kind of feel a little not as comfortable with putting more modular buildings on our sites, because that's kind of what we're asking people to help us, do right now in terms of construction, so we don't have to come back in 15 years or whatever.
Well,
for
I just want to
modular
make I want to make a distinction that modulars are very different than portables. Portables are kind of, you wheel them up and you plop them down and they're good to go. The modulars are they're the buildings that are the ones on the Bayside MLK campus.
Yeah.
And my understanding is those have a much longer life than portables. So they're completely different construction.
Yeah, I totally get it. I know that there's a difference in a modular from a portable, but even with those, like right now, the ones that are on the Phillips campus are needing some TLC, So yeah, thanks. That's a good point. You make a good point.
Well, it's been 7 years, right?
I think most of what I have seen with modular buildings is a 50 to 65 year projected lifespan.
Whereas portables are 15, 20.
Yeah, and people stretch them out beyond that, perhaps.
Yeah, like we do.
Advisably, but they do.
I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions on this timeline?
Yeah. No, so the capital repairs we could do sooner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Capital repairs. All right. So people had asked those timelines to kind of be compared and contrasted, and I apologize. I couldn't get to overlaying all these timelines. It was a little too many. I will make an attempt now that I have feedback on them to actually do an actual overlay. But this assumes a fall 2020 unification. You can see board approval this month. Communication and staffing, communicate plans to parents, staff, and students, bargain with unions, hiring and layoff. Willow Creek dissolves a charter. And then August through September is a design process where admin and teachers design operations, curriculum, logistics, and M&O staffs moves classrooms. That would be board approved, those plans. And then, we would continue to reflect and adjust, and schools would open under this scenario probably in October, and then continue to reflect and adjust throughout the school year, because we know on such a tight timeline that we're not going to get things perfect, but that we're going to be able to refine them throughout the year. And then the second timeline shows a fall 2021 unification. Note, it's not that much different. It's not that much more time. Yes, it buys us a few more months, but it doesn't buy us a year, and it doesn't buy us 10 months. I still would urge both of our boards strongly, even under a fall 2021 unification plan, to actually approve the plan in September of this year. And that September to November to be the design process with admin and teachers designing operations, curriculum, and logistics, and that the board approve the design of the two schools no later than November of 2020, so that we might have a full 2-month period to communicate the plan to parents, staff, and students beginning in December and January. If you'll recall, we heard a lot about folks making school choices in our community in January. And so I do think it's still critically important, even under a fall 2021 unification, that we are offering and communicating a plan in and around that time frame. So really still, it's more of a 4-month time frame to do the work that needs to get done, as opposed to a 2-month or 6-week time frame. Bargaining with SDTA and CSEA in between December and January, because we need to do an initial notice of any layoffs in February of 2021, so that those layoffs can be finalized by March 15th. We would then move campuses during the summer of 2021 and open our schools in August of 2021. And so you can see here, if you assume a fall 2021 unification, and that both reconfigured schools are opening in August or September of 2021, you're not getting to the design and final approval of the construction projects on any facilities until after the schools have been unified and they're configured in a different way on both campuses. You're also not selling any bonds, or pardon me, you're not getting taxed on any bonds until after both schools are unified. The project lists would potentially happen, and a bond sale might happen right before commencing the new school year, but long after the plans have been approved and designed by staff, and the community has had a chance to give input. And so what I am attempting to reflect in these timelines, and it actually doesn't change very much, even for a fall 2020, that's kind of the reflect and adjust piece, is that the facilities development process and new facilities for these two unified schools, if we pass a bond this fall, at the earliest are available 4 years after unification. If we wait another 2 years, new facilities are available at the earliest 6 years after unification, meaning only the kindergartners in that first unified group kindergartners in the first unified schools would ever be in the new buildings. And that is one other reason why I believe it is in our best interest, the community's best interest, and most importantly, the best interest of children, to consider a bond this fall, so that the students that have been affected by these moves and these changes actually can benefit by being in some new modernized facilities. Any questions on these last two timelines?
I'm still digesting it. Yeah. Following the timeline, it makes sense. Specifically, because the dates are pushed out, there's more communication that's going to happen. There's more input. There's more, and so that makes me feel really comfortable. I hope it, has the community at large in that same space of comfort, because we're not talking about breaking ground before 2021 or
even finalizing plans, really.
I don't think right. Well, and I think part of what I heard, at least, was a real concern about wanting to focus on unification before we moved into a lot of design. And I think what I'm hearing is that we got to do all that work now, no matter what, or this fall. And then we'll have this opportunity to, as part of the sort of next phase of unification, to have those discussions about how we move forward together as one school in two sites.
Absolutely. And I know that there was a lot of energy paid, towards the project list, and rightfully so. All school construction and design processes that I have been a part of significantly engage staff and students and administrators, as well as parents, on the design of the building. So even if we get a project list, we still have to choose which projects to do off that list. And at that point, that's when parents and teachers and kids and administrators get to move buildings around a site map and kind of make final decisions around the logistics of what's going to go where and how. And so I do think that there is ample opportunity for the community to have input on any of these projects, any modernization, any facilities repair that needs to happen. And again, it delivers on some updated facilities, while some of the students that will be part of this unification are still in the building. Whereas waiting another 2 years to go for a bond means that those kids will never see the building, really.
Yeah, I think that's important too, for each of those, demographics to have a voice. I really would love to hear from the people who are going to be in the building the most. That is teachers, staff, but most importantly, children.
Yeah, and I think the other piece that is that the longer we put this off, the more expensive it's going to be, particularly to deal with the, I will get the term right, but what we are not calling deferred
Capital
maintenance.
repairs.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's, yeah, I mean, we got to deal with it.
Yeah. When you look at your timeline under the facilities design and construction, you have the contract architecture firm. This whole timeline starts January 2021.
Right.
So when you think of that date and put it on top of these unification timelines, so there's a January 2021 date in the green. And so if you scroll down to unification fall 2020, January 2021, I mean, it's way after, you know, it's not even on the timeline. So it'd be after everything's done. And then the hiring the architect would happen sometime around the bargaining.
Yep.
So we'd be pretty far along.
Itoko is on the bargaining notice layoffs February 2021. That's just a placeholder, correct? Because that's around the time that notices have to go out, if they are going out.
Initial notices, if they go out, must go out in February so that they can be ratified in March, by March 15th.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right. If you have no further questions.
I have one last important question.
Yes.
Who is going to be taking the resolution to the county when? And can we get a video of it sent to us?
Robert,
I'm kind of joking, but kind of not.
Tis I accept the responsibility, and as I have in the past. It's different this year. Abel pointed out that with COVID, you don't have to actually go in person anymore. You can do it all online and then mail all the signatures. But I will say we need signatures on final documents from the board president and the superintendent Thursday morning, pending board action on Wednesday night.
Okay.
Wow.
And then you email it or send electronically, we're going to get a confirmation, right, from Dan Miller or whomever.
I'm assuming that they will email back to say, yes, we got it. And
Yeah.
if I don't hear Thursday when I send it, I will follow up on Friday. That's
in
why
person.
That's why I'm going to respect their rules, but I will follow up if I don't hear on Thursday, on Friday, to say that, did you get it for sure?
Okay.
And Robert, provided that we're pushing this through, because we are still talking, we got over 30 people on the line that at some point are going to pipe in.
Right.
But just hypothetically, we're pushing forward, and we got the final draft and blah blah blah. Will that go out certified? The hard copies?
Yeah.
Once I get confirmation that they have it by email, I think it can go in regular mail. In the directions, it doesn't say make it special, because once they have it, they have it.
Thank you. I just want to, note to everyone that Deborah Turner is on the platform now. Welcome, Deborah. Thank you for joining us. All right, Dr. G.
Okay. I believe this is the favorite time of the hour for the public. We can call for public comment on 4.01.
Thank you, sir. Did you want to give guidelines on that, or is it just general on any of what we put up on the platform? You can comment on.
Yes.
Just anything.
Anything that we put here as board backup or we discussed, the public has an opportunity to comment on. And just a reminder, comment limits are 3 minutes. If you would wish to comment, you can raise your hand. Go to the participant list at the bottom of your Zoom and hover over your name and raise your hand. And we will recognize you. I am scanning our participants. And perhaps my eyes deceive me, but I see no intent from the public to comment.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
Shall we give them a minute?
I think we probably should.
Chris Durbin.
All right, I'd like to recognize Chris Durbin.
Hello. I just wanted to make an observation just to check if it's correct. I love the idea of what was said about, wanting to hear from those who will be in these buildings, who will be in the schools, so the students and the teachers and the staff. And it just seems to me that correct me if I'm wrong, but if unification happens sooner rather than later, then there will be more time for the students, the staff, and the teachers to be in those buildings, see how they work, see how the campuses work, see where the needs are, before those kinds of decisions need to be made about how the bond money will be spent. So, that's all. Is that right?
It makes sense.
Yeah, about a year. Yeah, about a year's more time.
Okay.
So I do believe that we are starting the year with remote learning. Certainly, we're not going to know how long we'll have to do remote learning, or when we'll be able to have children back on our campuses. But it surely does make sense for them to pipe in as they are on the campus. So, and we have no idea of when that's going to be, correct, Dr. Garcia, since this is very fluid with COVID-19.
It is tied to being on the watch list for the state. And so when we come off of that watch list, we can start in-person school. If we would like to start in-person school prior to that, then we can seek a waiver from our county public health officer. The guidelines for the waiver have not yet been put out by the state and adapted by each county. So we don't know what that will look like. And I do want to note that, of course, all of that is subject to bargaining.
Thank you, sir.
We do have another intent from the public to comment. Mr. Donald Parker. Donald, thank you for being here with us tonight.
Is he muted?
Yes.
Hit unmute, Mr. Parker. There you go.
And I hit it 3 times.
I can hear you now.
Oh, you can, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, sitting here listening to all the pros and cons of this thing. But anyway, my first question would be, how did we let this deferred maintenance get so bad to this point that we need so much repair here? I don't know if you want to answer that or not, but it just seems to be that we had quite a bit of money in the school budget year after year, but yet there was no maintenance ever done to anything, Secondly, looking at the draft and the bond that you do have proposed and the list of items that you have to be repaired, it almost looks like you're setting up for another bond to be implemented also to complete the repairs, the new construction and repairs, as I'm gonna call it, that you guys are requesting. Times of COVID-19, this is really, really, really an uncertain time for a lot of us homeowners, and us blue-collar workers coming from down here in Marin City and stuff, Black Lives Matter, elderly, senior citizens and everything. I'm looking at my tax bill right now, and it's $9,683.12, you know. And it looks like on that tax bill here, we already have a school bond down there for building the school down there at the MLK site down there. And now we're asked to put another bond on the site, which we are seniors that nobody is exempt from. And I think that looking at that bond that you want to put on your deal, looking at the fire bond that just passed, looking at the Tamalpais High School bond, they're putting, well, two of them on there, one equaling $455 and another one equaling $98. And then we have the increase of taxes by the county every year. You know, next year I'll be paying over $600 or more on my tax bill. And now being out of work and being disabled and a senior citizen, it's just like, you know, some of these charges are really, really getting out of hand. And it looks to me and seems to me that this draft that you're presenting to the voters seems to be tainted, manipulated, and I just don't think it's right. I think you guys are rushing into something that's you're trying to push it through too soon and at the wrong time. For the wealthy people may be able to afford it, but the few black homeowners down here in Marin City, I know it's going to hurt them real bad to have to put up and pay up for all these new school bonds and all these new taxes going on. And yeah, you may say yours only equals $60, $100, or $200, but when you take and you added all those up on top of whatever your tax bill is, you know, you're basically looking at, on the lower end of things, more than $1,000 a year that's going to be coming at our taxpayers and our elderly, senior, and disabled community here, because some of us do own houses, and, you know, we're just hanging on by the hair on our teeth, you know. So anyway, I think you guys should take this back to the drawing board. You can put on another ballot, on another bond, on another ballot on a special election at a later date and time, after some of this COVID stuff has been worked out, and after there's a little bit more thought and a little bit more consideration that goes into it, especially with teaming up and partnering up with people to help with some of these expenses and everything. So I'm just totally against your idea. I'm for the kids and always have been, and I'm just totally against everything that you guys got going on here right now, because you're trying to rush it through. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald. So, Itoko, I don't know if you heard all of it. There's quite a few comments made and questions that were asked, including the deferred maintenance and how it got so bad. It does seem, you know, really high for one individual on one property within this community to have to pay, you know, those types of taxes. But can you address those the questions that he asked?
I will do my best.
All right.
I think I would like to start with, you know, how we got to this point where capital repair is going to require so much of this bond. And I think there's three major factors in that regard that I believe and I see and that I'm familiar with. Excuse me just one second. Sorry. My 19-month-old want to comment too. I apologize for that.
It's public comment session. He's welcome.
Come on. Wisdom from the mouth of babes. Yeah.
So, you know, there's a couple issues. That the original design, the way that the Nevada Street campus was designed, and some of the materials that were chosen are susceptible to salty air. So that's one issue on the Nevada Street campus. A second issue is the way that some of the drainage was designed and developed. Those of you that are intimately familiar with that campus, there's a series of drainage ditches basically behind the buildings, and they were designed to catch the runoff that comes down the hill and divert water away from the buildings. Some of those ditches are now almost 40 years old, and they don't divert all the water away from the buildings, particularly if any debris or detritus falls in them from the large amount of trees and shrubs and bushes that are on that campus. And then not all of the buildings were actually fitted with gutters and downspouts. That was one of the first things that I discovered in walking that campus within my first 2 days on the job. Is there are multiple walkways that connect those buildings that don't have gutters on them. And so what you had is a situation where water in many places, particularly on the upper campus, was just seeping directly into the foundation and the wood of those buildings. And those of you that work, in construction know you don't want wet wood kind of ever. You want to keep your wood dry. To address the second part of what I heard Mr. Parker say is that there was money in the budget that wasn't spent on deferred maintenance. And while I believe that he may be correct in years prior to my arrival, I can't really accurately speak to that. But I know in the year immediately prior to my arrival that about $300,000 was spent on deferred maintenance on the Nevada Street campus. And we have spent significant resources this year as well. I don't know, Dr. Clark, if you can get me an exact figure. We haven't quite closed the books yet. So we'll make sure that when we do, we call that out so that it is public knowledge. But there were significant resources put towards deferred maintenance in the 18-19 school year. And I believe if you speak to most people in the Willow Creek community, they would agree that while there's a lot of work still to be done and a lot of things that need to be improved, that campus was better cared for this year than it has been in quite some time in terms of the landscaping and the maintenance and general repairs being made to different wooden structures and things of that nature. Director Taylor has done a significant amount of work over there that has been highlighted in several board meetings, from recreating gates and flagpoles and fences and doors. And we redid all the gutters this year because of the state of the gutters. Basically, that they weren't catching any rainwater. And we decided to fix that last summer immediately once we assessed that. We did report the softscape on all of the plate equipment over there this past summer under our direction. And so there has actually been a not insignificant amount of money put into deferred maintenance, at least in the last 2 years. And we're committed to continuing to expend those resources while we make this decision about how to fund capital repairs or not to fund them at all. I think another kind of third leg of this idea of how the campus got there is I believe the board fully intended to float a bond in 2016. And that bond would have significantly covered capital repairs at actually a much reduced expenditure rate. I'm sure, Caroline, you remember this better than I do, but I think I've seen figures ranging from 17 to 20 million, or 12 to 17 million on the Nevada Street campus that were done in the facilities assessment in 2016. Those costs have significantly escalated since then. And that is part of the reason why it will cost so much in in capital repair because we continue to kick the can down the road. And every year that we kick the can down the road, it will cost us more money to do those capital repairs. While I feel Mr. Parker's pain and sentiment regarding the amount of property tax that we pay in Marin County, I have no impact or influence on Tam High and the bonds that they float, and I do want to say that those bonds support our students often as well. So I'm not saying I'm against those bonds, but I pay those taxes too on an undeveloped parcel of property that I have in unincorporated Marin County, and the library taxes and the fire protection taxes and the whole litany of taxes. So I'm not unfamiliar with that. And he's right; they do add up. I pay about $5,000 worth of taxes for a undeveloped piece of property that doesn't have a house on it. And so I understand where he's coming from, and his points about elderly homeowners and blue collar workers in Marin City and black homeowners in Marin City are important points that need to be considered, and so do the future of the children, as he said that he supports, and I believe he does support. And so these are all questions that will need to be weighed by the board in seeking a bond resolution, and then by the voters at the ballot box. And so I do think that one of the things that we could do is we've been saying that we'll look for outside funding to develop some of these projects. And one silver lining to this COVID era in which we are in is that the eyes of philanthropy are on our community. And perhaps it would be worthwhile to explore what it might look like to create a philanthropic ask and a philanthropic give that could support our senior homeowners for the first few years of this tax bond, and support Black home ownership. And I think that, in terms of Black Lives Matter, we need to consider additional programs outside of our bond that support Black home ownership in general, that look at how to help Black people make down home payments on homes and become homeowners in Marin City. If we are going to conserve our historically Black community, then the Black folks that want to become homeowners in Marin City also deserve attention and support. And so I'm not sure if I covered all of his questions, but that is my best effort.
Yeah, it was broad, and so thank you. I think it clarified a lot. It just seems so atypical for one homeowner to have such high taxes, but that's his reality. And also with that said, they're not just Black homeowners in Marin City. They're Black homeowners in the 94965. There are blue collar workers in the 94965. They don't just live in the projects. They don't just live in the communities here in Ponderosa, Oak Knoll, or the pole homes. So yeah, it's a very challenging time. But at the end of the day, every individual's situation is going to be a little different. How we're in the business of educating, and we need to have safe facilities for our students. Is there any other?
Yeah, I just want to add real quick, Itoko, to your list of reasons why there's so much capital repairs needed at this point is simply the age of the buildings. We've got some of the built in the 90s, some 1945, some I think in the 80s also. So we've just got buildings that are nearing the end of their useful life, regardless of how well we maintain them, the portables included. So part of that is not necessarily deferred maintenance that wasn't paid over time. It's simply that, the time is nigh for these buildings to be replaced.
Yeah,
I like that.
Caroline, if I'm correct, there was some water pooling in the library. I don't
Yeah,
even know if
they had
that's
a
been,
little swimming pool in the library.
yeah.
I think it was coming up through the foundation. So there's drainage issues.
Thank you
I'm
for
sorry, Deborah.
clarifying that, Caroline.
What?
I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have a comment?
No, I did not. I mean,
Okay.
thanks. Sorry, I'm here. I'm listening.
I would like to recognize, if there are no further comments from the trustees, I'd like to recognize, Bonnie, did you have a comment?
No.
I'd like to recognize Jenny Smith. Jenny Smith, thanks for being here tonight.
Hey guys.
Hello.
I just wanted to real quick say that I really, this is a long process. The two things that I've observed during this meeting, one, it's really hard, it's hard for me to hear the conversation about where to put the deferred maintenance piece in the bond measure in order to not raise curiosities. That to me felt transparent, glad it's going to go there, but it felt like a lot of shenanigans around something that is just, you're trying to play catch up for many, many years of deferred maintenance, during which time you guys were not responsible. So I understand that. But it did feel weird how you were trying to couch it and engineer it. 1, 2, so that's just how I feel. 2, when somebody makes a comment, a substantive comment about how they feel, this is just a comment to the whole board. It's best to listen and acknowledge and not defend, because it makes it sound like you guys are arguing with the public rather than taking the shareholders, stakeholders' voices into consideration. So those are just the two things that I've heard this meeting, and I'm in a mood to speak up about them.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate that.
You're saying, Jenny.
If there's anyone who feels that we're not taking what they are saying to heart, and that it's coming off as being light, let me be the first to extend an apology for that, because that is totally not the intent. You're on this platform so that you can be heard, and it's important that everybody is heard. I can't, answer to your first point, but without a doubt, we take nobody lightly. I'm sorry, Caroline, what were you going to say?
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I was saying I tell Jenny that I hear what she's saying, and I take that to heart, and I apologize if we aren't approaching people's comments in a way that seems defensive.
Thank you, Caroline.
And I agree, and thank you very much for raising it, Jenny. I want to say with the nomenclature, because I totally get, and had the same concerns, and then I started thinking, well, I'm kind of using the wrong terms, right? Because I have my head thinking about something, and what was, the term that I'm using is probably not the right term. And so what we've got to do is fix, and make that a good, work on the Nevada Street facility to deal with the improvements. So I get it that sounds confusing, but then I realize it's just because I didn't know the right language and how to do things. And so we certainly don't want to do anything that is inappropriate, but thank you for clarifying that. And I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the confusion was that deferred maintenance can be used to cover a broad range of things, but in the world of bonds and bond funding, it's much more specific. And so I think it was just a matter of refining the description of what pieces of work are in the bond world, deferred maintenance versus capital repairs. So it wasn't that we were, and I hear what you're saying, It wasn't that we were necessarily trying to play games. As Bonnie was saying, it was more that in the bond world, deferred maintenance means something completely different from capital repairs. So we just need to refine our project list to make sure that it fits under the capital repairs description as opposed to deferred maintenance, which means something different than what we've been using so far.
Thank you for the clarity. And also, it's not about us being reactionary, because we have been on this platform for many evenings. We've done lots of discussions. We've put in hours and hours as a public servant, and we're not doing it lightly. So I'm hoping that everyone on this platform at this time right now does understand that. We have several more meetings this week alone. So it's a lot of time going into it. It's not something that we even feel is rushed. Deborah, did you have a comment?
No, I'm sorry that I missed the first part of this important and sort of exciting meeting, I have to say. You know, I'm here thinking, looking ahead to us creating this unified community of educators who care about our kids. And it's really exciting to think that we are now putting into motion a means to ensure their safety and their excitement and all kinds of really great ways for them to be in the environment, be in open space. I mean, it's just, and not have to worry about ceiling panels falling down or water bubbling up from the floor. I mean, I know that it's tedious, and I so acknowledge the work that Trustee Green and also put in, and Itoko and all the planners, but I'm coming in late, sitting beside the Rogue River and thinking, this is really exciting what we're talking about. And I do believe that it's a new time when we can really make good on our dreams for our schools. That's me.
Thank you for that inspirational moment. I feel like I've been working on this for 4 years, and gee, I have.
You have. I've been right along with you.
16, yeah. So this is just a delayed, if we approve this, it's delayed gratification.
Well, yes, and I'm thrilled because I have to say one of the first meetings that I attended was about the situation of the upper school campus at Willow Creek, and my panic at that time about, oh my God, are we exposing our kids to mold? Are we exposing our kids to, really bad, dangerous, not just our kids, obviously, but our teachers. But, it was really very urgent, very frightening when, to find out about the situation. And I really want to thank our former interim superintendent, Tarina Maris, for moving quickly to, we moved on that, right, to take care of it. But I'd much rather spend our time thinking about, let's, fix those classrooms so we can do something that is inspirational and supportive for kids rather than just worrying that they'll get sick by coming to school. That is not where I want to be. So.
Agreed.
Dr. Garcia, is there any other intent from the public? You're muted, sir. Can you unmute him, Steve?
I guess it would help if I unmuted myself.
Yeah.
I see no other intent from the public to comment.
Okay, and by the way, we are coming back on this platform on Wednesday. So if there is any other intent from the public, I would suggest that maybe you email it to Dr. Garcia. You can copy the board if you like. We can't answer because of the Brown Act. But at this point, I am going to suggest that we go right on to 5.01. That is to adjourn this meeting.
Sorry to interrupt you, but Mr. Parker raised his hand for a second comment.
So can Mr. Parker probably put that in an email?
If that is your direction, ma'am, yes.
Would be nice. Thank you, sir.
Oh, I move we adjourn, and thank you all for coming to my birthday party meeting.
Happy
Oh,
birthday!
happy birthday.
That's right, it's your birthday.
It's like a Zoom party.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
kid's Zoom party.
I meant to mention that at the top of the hour. So given that it is her birthday, happy birthday. She has moved. Can we get a second?
I'll second.
Second.
It's a birthday.
Moving second. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
All right, folks. Good night. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Good night.
All right. Good night.